Well, welcome back again to Cassimotive, and in this video what I wanted to do is I wanted to share with you 3 lessons that I have learned from the documentary which came out on Michael Jackson leaving Neverland. A rather interesting documentary, and I think there are so many lessons that I can take from it, but there were 3 which I think are really pertinent and are really important, that I believe can really be of some value to you, and that can really serve you, and that can help you in your life get to that next level to become a higher, fuller expression of yourself. So I hope that it can really serve you, and it can really help you really think about your life and think about certain specific areas in your life that you may be going through, and also love and judgment and making decisions and biases that you may have in your life at the moment. So here we go, 3 lessons that I learned from Michael Jackson's leaving Neverland. Number 1, I realized that our attachment and love for someone can blind us. We must pay attention. And so what I would ask you, and I was really thinking about this very deeply, what I've come to realize is I've been asking many people about their opinions on Michael Jackson. I've been asking people, well, what do you think of the documentary? I saw lots of articles about how some radio stations are not going to play his music. And what was really interesting for me, and I would ask you, is to ask yourself the question, is love blinding you? Do you have so much love for somebody that actually they may be making decisions, and they may be doing things that are not actually the right things to do? Let me explain to you exactly an example of what I mean by this. I have 2 friends in my life, and both of them are women. Both of them in the last 2 years have gone through abusive relationships. Now, both of them, when I ask them, how have you, in fact, actually, let me go further. It's actually 3 of my friends, I lie, have all gone through relationships where they've been cheated on, where they've, and I mean, this has got ridiculous. I mean, to the point, like, for example, I was speaking to my friend, and she was saying to me like what had happened, and she said to me that she saw her boyfriend put up a Snapchat of him and a woman in a hotel room together, and do you see what I mean? And they were together at the time. And so what I came to realize is, and this is what I want to suggest to you, is that don't be so driven by love for somebody. Don't be so driven by an idealization of somebody that you're blinded by their faults, that you're blinded by their wrongdoings, that you're blinded by things that are not actually in a reflection of your core values. Does that make sense what I mean by that? And so I would ask you to look at somebody who you admire, somebody who you idolize, somebody who you claim to love, and ask yourself the question, am I looking and taking the best parts out of them and then letting go of the bits that are not good? Let me go further into this, because this is really important, and it's a lesson that I had to learn very, very quickly. Essentially, there are a lot of people out there who I admire. The likes of Steve Jobs. I love Steve Jobs because of his insatiable desire to produce excellent products. I love his desire for excellence. I love his desire for simplicity, his desire for greatness, to become all that he's capable of becoming. I love that desire. But I didn't like the fact that Steve Jobs was arrogant. I didn't like the fact that Steve Jobs treated everybody like absolute shit. I didn't like that. I like Donald Trump. I like Donald Trump because he is an illustration of what is actually that somebody is capable of achieving. It is a representation of somebody who can take a resource like being given a certain amount of money and multiply it to huge magnitude. But I don't like the fact that sometimes the way he comes across seems arrogant. I don't like the fact that sometimes the way he is, the words that he uses, and his understanding of body language and human psychology, he uses it to progress where he wants to get to, and that comes at a detriment to where some people feel alienated, and some people feel where they feel like he is how would I say, what's the best word for me to use? That he is discriminating, or he's putting people down. I don't like that aspect. And so my point that I want to get to you is, there's a lot of people who I admire, lots of people who are my heroes, loads of people who I love, loads of people who I want to be like, lots of people, even in my own life at the moment, who I absolutely, there is a certain aspects of them which I'm like, wow, I would love to be like that. Wow, I'm going to take a little bit of what they've got and apply it into my life. But the point that I want you to get is, there are things about them that I don't like and disregard. And what I do is I take all those away. And what I found is that so many of us, we have people who we love, we have people who we idolize, we have people who we are our heroes. But what we do is we don't look at the parts of them that are not positive. We don't recognize these parts as flaws. And the point that I want you to get is, it's not that I'm trying to say that people don't have flaws. Every single one of us has flaws. There is nobody who is perfect, right? And if you look for flaws, you will find them. The point that I'm trying to get to you is, don't allow your love and idolization of people to stop you from seeing their flaws, so that you can not morph and absorb those negative traits of what they've got. Okay, so that's the first suggestion that I would share with you that I learned about this, because I think so many of us, whilst we love Michael Jackson's music and we love the way his music makes us feel, and we love the fact that he tried to achieve excellence, we have to recognize that there are certain things about Michael Jackson that weren't good. Same with me. I can tell you right now, there are certain things even about me, and I was actually sharing this with a friend of mine recently. I am somebody who's got conviction. When I believe something, you will not persuade me otherwise. I'm telling you now, when I know something that I want, I will not stop until I have it. Now, here's what I had to recognize about myself. I had to recognize that actually sometimes I have so much conviction that I'm willing to disregard everybody else's opinions and everybody else's perspectives, because I'm so blinded by where I want to go. And that's a flaw, and something that I have to recognize. And it took me 4 times of a friend of mine telling me that. And I finally got it when she said to me, Cassim, I don't even want to bother telling you stuff, because I know that whatever I tell you, you're just automatically not going to accept it, because it's so hard to have like an argument with you, because you have so much conviction on stuff. You believe things so strongly that no matter what I do, I'm never going to persuade you otherwise. And I had to recognize that in myself and say, Cass, hold on a minute. So when I get into an exchange, I have to always watch myself and say, okay, Cash, now that you're in an argument, you've got to listen to what the other person actually says. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, but you've got to recognize that you have flaws, Cass. You're not perfect. You're not always right. Your perspective isn't always correct. Right? And so what I would share with you is, recognize this. Do not allow love to blind you. Too many of us allow love to blind us, and then we get violated, we get treated like shit, we get treated like absolute crap. People use us, and because we want to be loved, because we love the person, because we idolize the person, because the person is our hero. Some of us, our hero, our idol, somebody who we love is our father. But our father, what we forget, whilst he loved us and he protected us, be our mum. And so we have to recognize that we can't inherit that aspect of him. Yes, be protective. Yes, have passion, have drive, and all of those things that your father had. But don't then inherit that aggressive, that violent aspect of what your father had. Does that make sense what I mean by that? I hope that adds some value and really helps you get that point across. But essentially, in very simple terms, is when you look at people, what I would suggest to you do is look at them for both their good and their bad. Take what's good, take what's brilliant about them, and disregard anything that isn't brilliant. You know, you look at somebody who, let's say like Steve Jobs. Great, I take Steve Jobs. I take away the fact that he's an innovator. I want to be an innovator. I want to think creatively. He was all about simplicity. Great. Okay. okay, let me take and develop that trait of simplifying things. Wonderful. Hold on a minute though, Cass. But everybody who speaks about him, who he encountered, says that he was aggressive, that he was abrupt, that he was rude towards people. Okay, Cass, right. So take those parts and now don't take on the aggressiveness, the rudeness, the just firing people, not understanding people's true value, not giving people a chance, not being patient with people, not doing things in the right way. Don't do that. Does that make sense? The second lesson that I learned, so that's the first one. The second lesson that I learned from leaving Neverland is, are you big enough to challenge your own convictions? And once again, and I will use myself as an illustration, many of us have beliefs that we have. Many of us see things that are wrong in the world. Many of us identify problems. We identify things that people are doing that ethically and morally are not really right. It may be at work where for example, where I work at the moment, I work in Pizza Hut part-time. And one of the things that I recognized was, one of the things in the evening that you have to do is you have to prepare the dough bread for the next day so that it's defrosted. You have to prepare certain, what do you call them? Like cookie dough, like cookie dough. In Pizza Hut, we do like cookie dough. And the cookie dough has to be defrosted overnight, right? So that it's prepared for the next day. It takes 24 hours to defrost. And one of the things that I recognized was that many times what people would do is that when they're leaving their shift, they won't do certain things. And they would say things like, well, it's not my shift. Well, I won't be working tomorrow. Well, I won't be here. Well, it's not my shift. And I always have to catch people and say, that is not the right thing to do. Whilst I recognize what you're saying, and you may want to go home, but that isn't right. What you're saying isn't the right thing to do. And many times I have to catch people out and stop people from saying that and say, hold on a minute. I get that tomorrow may not be your shift. I get that you may not be working tomorrow, but isn't it the right thing to do to maybe stay 10 minutes later to take out the cookie dough so that the people tomorrow are then not having to tell customers that we don't have cookie dough because it hasn't defrosted in time? Do you see what I mean? And so my point to you and what I learned is, how hard would it have been for these two men to not step forward and say something about the experience that they had? Because so many people love Michael Jackson. I essentially don't think I know anybody who doesn't like Michael Jackson or who doesn't love a Michael Jackson song. And the courage that it took for these two men, whether you think that it's right or they're lying or they're not, either way, the courage and the wrath that they knew they would be facing if they decided to speak out would be overwhelming, which they have. Most people don't believe them. Most people think they're liars. Most people think that they're making it up. They're trying to get attention. They just want to make money. They want to make money from a book deal. They want to make money from the papers. Most people, that's what they believe. Most people aren't even fazed by Michael Jackson. Here's my question. Are you big enough to challenge what you believe, to challenge the convictions, to challenge things that are not right? Are you big enough? Can you speak up when something isn't right? Now, I'm not talking about you having to be a leader and changing the world. I'm talking about small things like the example that I just gave with the cookie dough. Maybe, perhaps where you work, you've recognized that maybe your company has been talking a lot recently about recycling. Yet you identify that you're only doing it in one area and not all the other areas. And are you big enough? And you know that isn't right. And you know that there is no integrity. Are you big enough to stand up for it? To send your CEO a letter? To go and speak to him directly? To send him an email and say, hold on a minute. We as a company claim that this is what we stand for, and yet look at what we're doing. This isn't in line with what our core values are. This isn't in line with what our mission statement is. Are you big enough to do that? Perhaps it may be even with your own child, right? You talk to your own child about the fact that you should study and you should read. Hold on a minute. Have you asked yourself the question, am I reading? Am I studying? Because remember, the greatest motivational principle that ever existed, that has ever existed, is that people do what people see. In other words, if you tell your child to read, but your child doesn't see you reading, your child isn't going to read. Does that make sense? Because why should they? They're looking at mummy and daddy not reading, and they're thinking something isn't making sense here. Why would mummy and daddy say that reading is important, and yet mummy and daddy are not reading? Something isn't. It's mummy and daddy say that I should be healthy, yet mummy and daddy eat chocolate all the time and they eat takeaways, and the child is confused. Do you see what I'm saying? Are you big enough to be able to challenge your own conviction, to challenge your own beliefs, to challenge your own behaviors, your own traditions? Something for you to think about. The third lesson, and the last lesson that I learned, which I want to share with you, is, are you going on your gut instincts, or are you going on the facts, or are you going on both? I repeat, are you going and making decisions based on your gut feelings, based on the facts, or are you basing it based on, or are you making decisions based on both? Because the reason why I say this is I have come to the realization that too many of us, right, believe what we see. If we see it on social media, it must be right. If we see it in the papers, it must be right. If we see a documentary about it, it must be true. I'm wondering how you form the basis for your conclusions, for your philosophies, for your ideas. How do you form them? Do you form them both on gut instinct, from studying, from facts, from eyewitnesses? Because one of the things that I have come to realize about myself especially, and the mistake that I made for years and years, is honestly, I used to just believe what I saw. If clearly it's on the BBC News, it must be right. If I see it on Sky, it has to be correct. I mean, why would the news lie? If my parents tell me something, surely it has to be the truth. Why would my own parents tell me something which is a lie? Right? So when I was growing up, one of the things, and this is where this came from, when I was growing up, one of the things my parents told me, and the belief system that had been downloaded onto me, even through school and social media, was that in order to be of a success, you've got to go to school, go to college, go to university, and get a really good job in a very stable company. That was a belief system that I've been growing up around. And even to this day, my mum, every time I see her, essentially wants me to still live from that blueprint. But I had to get to a point in my life where I was like, that's not really what I want. That's not really what I feel is right for me. Based on what I've studied, having looked at life, having looked at the research, having looked at the future, having looked at where the world is going, having questioned people, having asked people what success and failure is, having spoken to people who are much older than me and asked them what life is all about, in all honesty, I've come to the conclusion that that really is not the right way to go. So, for example, in this area, I recognize that I did research and I've seen that essentially most companies now are not going to be around for very long. We are in such a perpetual change. We've got such accelerated change that basically most companies are never going to be able to keep up with the level of change. Most companies are too big to innovate and be able to keep up with change consistently, which is why you recently have seen a lot of really big companies like Toys R Us, which have been around for years and years. That's why they're going bankrupt. Not because they weren't good companies, but they're not keeping up with the rate of change. Recently, you've seen companies like Argos go from delivering in 3 days to now they can deliver the package on the same day. Why? Because if they didn't move with the times and be able to compete with companies like Amazon, right? Yesterday I ordered a book and the book arrived on the same day. I went on Amazon yesterday morning and I ordered a book and the book arrived on the same day. Can you believe that? Can you now imagine that it takes 4 or 5 days if you're a book company for your book to arrive? Who do you think somebody's going to choose? The company that is 4 days or the company that's one on the same day, right? Do you see what I mean? And so what I'm trying to suggest to you is, so when I realized this, and I also realized, and I started studying, and I also realized that AI is about to come into place, right? Artificial intelligence. So basically anything that can be done by a machine, so anything essentially really repetitive, which can be done by a machine, is basically going to replace us. It's going to replace human beings. Machines don't make mistakes. Machines don't get tired. Machines are cheaper. You don't have to pay machines as much as you have to pay me, right? A machine, for me, it could cost, if I work for your company, it could cost you 50 grand. But the machine is 10 grand and can do the same job faster and doesn't get tired, can do it 24/7, right? Productivity is so much easier, right? I then studied, and now we're looking at things like we've got cars which are going to be driverless coming into effect. I started looking at this stuff and I'm like, hold on a minute. Well, how is that going to impact me, right? So all of this stuff, when I start looking around, I'm thinking, hold on a minute. So me working for a job or trying to get a job in a stable company, this is a major problem for me. This doesn't exist. When I started looking at this stuff and I started putting two and two together, I was like, this strategy that my mum and my dad are telling me and society are telling me doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I had to start thinking, right, if I just follow the facts, if I just follow what I've been told, I'm basically going to end up in the same boat as everybody else. And for me, I want an extraordinary life. I want to live phenomenal. When I die, I want to be empty. I want to have used up everything by the time I die. So I was like, well, how the hell do I do that? Because I clearly can't do the same as everybody else and get those results. And so what I'm trying to suggest to you, and is really the lesson that I want you to get, is that you have got to make decisions, not based on your gut instincts, not just based on facts, but based on a multitude of studying life, of speaking to people, of questioning, of your gut instincts, of the facts, of the studies. You've got to actually go out there and study. If you don't study, if you don't go out there and ask questions, if you don't go out there and do your own research, you're going to essentially be buying into somebody else's plan. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but the plan that they may have for their life may not be the right plan for you. Right? Some people, for example, one of the areas that I had to recognize for myself is that I know that, for example, we're living longer and longer and longer. Look at the NHS, right? The NHS in about 50 years isn't going to exist. In 50 years, I'm going to be about 60 or 70. 60 or 70? I don't know the exact number. Here's the issue. If I'm 60 or 70 and there's no NHS, that means I'm probably going to need private care. Okay, so then I had to ask myself, well, how much does private care cost? Because I can't afford private care right now. And I would say I'm healthy and I probably can get a better job than most people can. So I had to think, okay, so I'm healthier now than most people. I'm more vibrant. I have more vitality. I can earn more money than somebody who's essentially like 60 or 70. And I can't even afford private care now. Well, how is it going to be in 50 years? So I then had to ask myself, okay, well, how much is private care? How much do I need to be earning now? How much do I need to be saving? What do I need to put in place for when I get there, right? This is just stuff that but you wouldn't know this stuff unless you start questioning your reality. And this is the point that I want you to get. Question what you think you know. You've been told certain things. How do you know that? Your parents have told you that this is the best way. How do you know that it's the best way? Have you challenged it? Have you spoken to other people? I get it. Even, shall I tell you, there was another way that I realized, and this is why I wanted to share this lesson with you. One of the things that I realized was that I was speaking to a friend of mine, and she was in a relationship. And she was in a relationship since she was, I think she said to me, since she was like 13. And she said, Cass, it's been really weird. Basically, I joined a job and she said to me, and she'd never been around me, and she said to me, Cassim, you've really made me think very differently because you've essentially made me challenge some of the things that have been happening in my relationship. Like, I was just asking her questions. I was like, for example, you and your partner, you don't do anything. You don't make memories. You don't go anywhere. All they do, right, this is what all they did. All they did was he would come around on the weekend and they'd basically stay in bed all day. And I was like, if you say you're together and you've been together since 14, do you not want to create memories? Do you not want to go and try new things, try new different food, go for a walk, go bike cycling, go and I don't know, go on holiday somewhere? Do you not want to like have memories? You don't want to do stuff? Go shopping, go for a walk, anything, go for a trek, leave the house. And she was like, well, Cass, I've never really thought about it like that before. I'd never really like had a different perspective. I just thought that's what you do because that's what I've always done in my relationship. And so my point to you is, you know, maybe in your life, in certain areas, you have never even thought that there were other options. Maybe you've always thought that all you're ever going to do is essentially be a mother. What about an entrepreneur? Have you thought about an entrepreneur? Maybe your entire life you thought you've always going to work for somebody. Have you thought about starting your own business? Maybe your entire life you've always thought, do you know what? All my family smoke, I'm going to be a smoker. Maybe have you ever thought of not smoking? I don't know. Maybe your entire life all your family have been farmers. Well, maybe have you thought about, I don't know, going into engineering? My point that I'm trying to suggest to you, and you see that I'm really passionate about this point, which is why I'm going on about it quite a lot and giving you all these stories, is you've got to question stuff. Don't just accept things. Don't be a follower, be a student. Don't just accept things as facts. Don't just go on gut instincts. You've got to challenge things. You've got to say, well, how do you know that? You tell me that this is the right way. I know you're my mum. I know you're my dad. I know it's the news. I know it's the papers. I know it's Facebook. How do I know that it's correct? How can I prove that this is accurate? How do I know? Do you know? How do you know? Just because it's you. Here's what I've learned. Your parents can only teach you to the degree that they know. If your parents have never been millionaires, they can't teach you how to be a millionaire. If all your entire family have never lost weight, they can't teach you how to lose weight. If everyone you know around you is addicted to heroin, they can't help you. The only people who can help you, not that these people are even bad people, right? The point is that you will need to go to somebody outside of that world to help you, to give you a different perspective, give you a different view, give you some options, right? Those are the three things that I wanted to share with you. I don't know, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you found perhaps that you've been primarily making decisions and making assumptions based on love? Or have you been somebody who's been challenging your own convictions and traditions and beliefs? Maybe you're somebody who's always been brought up when you were young, that actually people who were of a different faith than the one that you believe, well, they're not the right, they're not to be trifled, they're from the devil, they're not right. Maybe that's how you've been brought up. How do you know? How do you know? Perhaps for you, it's a fact that you've always been going on based on facts. Whatever people tell you is the truth. Or maybe you've been just going on your gut instincts. Maybe it's time now that you start looking at some strategies. Maybe it's time now that you start looking at some facts, you start looking at some studies, some science behind stuff. Something for you to think about. I hope that the video has added value to you. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm always keen to hear from people. Comment below, send me a message, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.